welcome to Atlanta Mix 108. Up next is Author Talk with your host, M.L.Ruscsak.
Good evening, Atlanta. I'm honored today to have an award-winning author on the show. Can you go ahead and tell our listeners your last name?
V.J. Lakshman.
Yeah, see, I would never get that.
So, Lakshman is it's a lucky name. At least my dad told me that.
Sounds like it. It sounds like it, especially since you already have an award.
Thank you.
For your series, Mythborn, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, before we get started with some simple Q&A, can you tell us a little bit about Mythborn?
Yeah. So, Mythborn is at its core is the story of a young apprentice monk / assassin in training who finds out that his master has been ordered to kill him in the next 8 days. And he is trying to figure out how to survive. And that begins sort of an epic journey for the two of them into what you trust, what you don't trust, what makes you a person, what sacrifice is too great and what's not in order to, what will you do to survive? Essentially, what depth will you go to survive? That's essentially what the story's about.
So the combat, from what I'm seeing, has been, and this is all in Mythborn that we're talking about, has been described as not typical fantasy swords and combat bashing. What exactly does that mean from your review? So
I'm a 35-year master of the martial arts. I trained in 3 or 4 different combat styles. Grew up in Bangkok, Thailand, and I've been training since I was 10 years old, and I'm 51 now, so a lot of time spent fighting. And what I found interesting in fantasy is that people, I think this might be a holdover from the 80s, but people just love the never-ending swinging of the swords, especially the bigger the sword, the better. And, real fighting isn't like that. Real fighting is honestly a series of very quick encounters that end when someone makes a mistake. And it ends either with, someone dying or someone being incapacitated. And I think what I tried to reflect in Mythborn was my training and the years I've spent sort of honing that practice so that people who read it, yes, the fights are interesting and you definitely would read them for that, but they're not never-ending dances of blade to blade. They're, they really are brutal and fast, and, it really is who's on that day. A great sort of sideline to that is, I trained and I competed, and there's many times, where I was ranked in the top 10 in the United States in fighting. And the difference in a tournament of 600 black belts fighting, the difference between the number one guy and the guy who came in 600th was hundredths of a second. It wasn't like none of them were dangerous. It was that who was on that day and who was off. So I find that a lot of times combat really isn't about just like, oh, how skilled are you, but also, how do you take advantage of the moment? How do you think when you're fighting? Are you fighting the best you can? Are you seeing all the opportunities? So Mythborn rings very true to people who train because they see the techniques in there and they go, well, I know exactly how that was thrown. I know exactly how that was executed. And, yeah, that would have killed someone.
Okay, so would the moves described actually work in the real world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's a funny story, but one of my investors actually had me dumb down some of the descriptions a little bit because he was worried about, liability if I actually explained how to do the technique so exactly that someone would go out and try it and either hurt themselves or hurt someone else. They absolutely would work. There's very little magical combat in the sense that, like a fireball flying out and blasting somebody, it's, there is that, but there's more of actual hand, wrist, leg, and arm locks and infighting that happens based on leverage and based on grappling techniques.
Now, as a fan of martial arts, I found these very interesting, by the way. So,
thanks.
You're welcome. I love the martial arts mixed in with the fantasy realm. So,
yeah, I thought that people lacked. I mean, the fun part in any kind of fantasy is essentially, will your hero live or die? And if there's no danger to them, if you know that they're essentially, Conan in a Conan story, you're not worried about Conan dying. I wanted to create a little bit more danger. I also wanted to make sure no one got comfortable with any of the characters and the fact that they might die. So, when you read the book, it definitely, I think, I've been told at least, it's a little bit of a cliffhanger in each part. And people are on the edge of their seats because they never know what I'm going to do. Okay,
so as an author that you have lived in this universe, you're working on your third book, I see. Why do you think people should read Mythborn in the series? I mean, I know why I want to read it, but...
So actually, I'm working on the fourth book. The third book is in the chute right now at Amazon. It'll be out July 18th on Amazon. So hopefully, people will be able to pick it up or come to our website at www.mythbornmedia.com and check it out. But I'm working on the fourth book. I do live in the universe. Why should you read it? I will tell you. I think. So here's the funny thing that's different about my book than anyone else's. I grew up with a lot of strong women in my life. I grew up with, women who didn't, my sister, my mom, unfortunately my wife, all of them are really, really, really competent and really, really focused. And, you don't get away with stuff and you can't blame things on gender biases, nothing. And I spent I just don't have that in my psyche at all. I think of people as competent or incompetent, smart or not smart, brave or not brave. I don't think of them as men or women. I think of them as people who have their own flaws. And so when I wrote Mythborn, I wrote it to really speak to the powerful women out there and the chance that they have to make a difference, and the fact that the world really shouldn't gauge them on a different standard than men. When I came up in the martial arts, my karate instructor told me, I don't care if you're a boy, a girl, a child, you all take the same test. When you get a black belt, you all have the same black belt. You pass the same test. There's not a girl test. There's not a boy test. There's not a kid's test. You all pass the same test. You're all black belts. And I grew up with that mentality. So for the first time, I feel there's a fantasy that's been written that really captures that kind of egalitarianism and makes everyone equals. And yes, there are dumb people in the book. There are people who are not competent, but it's not based on gender or race. It's based on themselves. And so I think when you read it, you get this vision of a fantasy world in which, in my book, the main, quote, antagonist is a woman. One of the main driving forces in the good, the protagonist's is a woman. One of the main people driving all the plot forward is a woman. And my book passes the Bechdel test, where two women, in movies at least, where two women talk to each other and not about a man. I pass that because my book isn't about trying to cater to what I think of as an 80s level of misogynism and horrible kind of stereotypical behavior, and instead focuses on competency and on intelligence, on bravery, and on awesomeness. And you find that in my book, regardless of gender or race. And I think that's special. I think that's different. And I think that opens up the book and the fantasy world to something better. That's a long answer, I think, right?
No, it's not a longer answer. It's a perfect answer. It really is. More the detail that you can give me makes me want to read the book more. Now, here's something I'm reading and I'm completely captivated by was that you're also the designer for the iconic Elder Scrolls, which not only do I play, but I'm obsessed with. How did that go to your vision for Mistborn?
Yeah, listen, so
going to go to the game, or
I'm sorry, say the last part.
Is Mistborn going to be out as a game soon, maybe?
Absolutely. So, first, the first part of the question, Elder Scrolls, a young, naive 19-year-old boy that was me, along with a programmer named Julian and a great designer guy named Ted, we built the Mistborn universe from the ground up. I must have written close to 5 novels worth of backstory in order to build the Elder Scrolls. And I'm sorry, I might have said Mistborn earlier. I meant Elder Scrolls. So, we built the Elder Scrolls from the ground up, and we spent years sitting outside talking about how the universe would grow, how to build it. We all were employees at Bethesda Softworks, and Bethesda has done this incredible job of taking all that and continuing this amazing series they've built into a worldwide, I think the number one role-playing game that's out there for the computer, space, for the PC space. And so, I have nothing but pride for what I started and for what has happened since I left Bethesda. When I started Mistborn, I really thought to myself, I used all the lessons I had learned from my time as a game designer, and I realized that I definitely could spend more effort and time into the backstory, and that would make the front story, the story that you as the reader read, that much more in-depthful. Have depth, and so insightful and have depth. And so I spent a lot of time, and when I say a lot, I mean maybe 10 years with Mistborn in my head, writing backstory, writing things that I knew the universe would need, writing things that I knew would be interesting. And as I did that, and as things coalesced, the story of Mistborn emerged out of that. And for those who don't know, I gave you the synopsis earlier of a boy looking to try and save himself from being killed. In fact, there's a much larger world and meta story happening that I think really comes into focus as you finish book 1 and get into book 2, where you start realizing not everything is what you think it is. Magic might be based on forgotten technology, nanotechnology. These people in this world, they may not actually be what we would consider alive. Maybe they're sentient AI. Maybe this whole world is actually a colony project that didn't actually work, and these beings, these myths that are being born, they're born from the colonist dreams. And so as you start diving into Mistborn, there's layers and layers that I've built that I think create a very rich world, a very rich experience. And it's absolutely going to be a video game. We are going to build something that's an interactive storyteller for the Amazon Alexa. We're going to build what I would love to build is turn-based sort of tactical combat game like XCOM 2, and obviously, and very, very really, a straight-on, deep, enormous, epic role-playing game. So, it's my bailiwick to do that. I've done 85 video game titles. I've generated over $1 billion in revenue for the titles that I've created, and I have the best game developers in the world ready to build Mythborn the game. So I'm pretty excited about that. And fans, if as you get into my world, just know there's not. It's not. What's on the surface is just scratching the surface. In reality, there's an iceberg below that water of work that I've done to make this world come to life.
So with everything you have going on in the works, how important is your media company like Dawn's Light that I believe you work with involved with the developing of possible movies or cinema or video games or what have you going on behind Mythborn?
Yeah, great question. Look, I mean, Dawn's Light has been the angel in the darkness that's holding the light up, right? Mythborn was a labor of love, and I did really well as an indie author with Mythborn to the tune of somewhere around 70 or 80,000 units of Mythborn sold originally, but we really focused on when Dawn's Light got involved. We took everything back to the drawing board. We had professional editors step in, because of the new funding. We had really great talent come in and say, hey, my only job is to make VJ's gold into jewelry, right, if that's a good analogy, right, taking that gold bars that I had created out of Mythborn and really fine-tuning it into something beautiful and sharp and polished. And they've done that, right? So the re-release of Mythborn, the launch of Mythborn now, represents not just years of work from me, but also 2, 3, 4 different editors involved in making sure that every piece of the story is correct, that it works well. And as they do that, Dawn's Light has brought to the table people, showrunners and agents and other people that can drive the Mythborn franchise into the public eye through different media. So I can't be anything but thankful and frankly, in awe of what Alex Ferguson, the president of Dawn's Light, has done to build a venue for artists like me. I mean, I think there's great work out there. I think there's great artists out there. Most of us never get heard of because we don't have a vehicle like Dawn's Light to drive great work up into the limelight. And that's exactly what Dawn's Light is. They pull us up out of the shadows and into the light. And I think his company is really aptly named, right? Dawn's Light. He brings us up, up into the dawn.
That is a perfect name for the company you're working with. And there are so many artists, authors, and so forth out there that need companies like Dawn's Light to get their work out there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you fell in with them.
Yeah, I got lucky.
So, well, you said your last name is Lucky, so there you go.
Yeah, Lucky Lakshman. It's amazing how lucky, how much my luck and has been in line with my effort. It's so strange. The more effort I put in, the luckier I seem to get.
There you go. Luck is hard work. That's behind that good luck.
It's a five years to be an overnight success.
Some people it takes 30, so it's
right.
all in perspective. Okay, so I'm reading through things, and you have a quote in one of your books that says, everyone might be seen as evil from a particular perception. What does that mean, and who is the bad guy in Mythborn, if there is one?
Well, what's great is it's true, right? I mean, what I realized, what I hated in fantasy was this penchant for stories to be written in which what I call there's a white room syndrome. And what I call white room syndrome is the backdrop of the room and what's going on around the character, they're all just created to give that character a chance to say some lines. So a great example is if you look at that scene in Lord of the Rings when Saruman is standing in that tower and he's, looking for the ring, and he's by himself in that black room. I wondered to myself watching that scene, like, what happens when the camera cuts? Like, does he go, oh, man, I got to walk down 100 flights of stairs to get lunch? Or does someone bring lunch up to him? Like, I mean, how does it work, right? How is that a real place? Because it seemed fit. It seems like a place that you're just stuck in that tower. And if you kill everyone who shows up with bad messages, like he was doing, who's going to come up those stairs? Nobody. You're stuck, right? So I hated that. I hated this idea that there are these bad guys who are bad for the sake of being bad. What I wanted was someone who was bad, but they're bad because they have a motivation that to them makes complete sense. And that is my main antagonist, Lady Lilith, a celestial goddess of the world of Arcadia. She is the ruler of her people called the Eris, and they're like unseen sort of genies, or they're spirits. And eons in the past, they and the people of Eden were all one. They were all combined, and they were the will if the people were the way, right? They were the voice and the people the power, right? They were together, and they worked together to sort of enact their abilities and things like that. And they were the silent partner on your shoulder, the thing inside of you that gave you the ability to do the things you did. Something happened, and they all got separated, and now the Eris exist on their own, and Lilith, as leader of the Eris, her people are somewhat at the whim of the dreams of Eden. When the people of Eden believe in a god, that god is an Eris, he becomes more powerful, or she becomes more powerful. When they stop believing in a god, she disappears, he disappears. They lose their families, they lose their lives. They are at the whim of these people who are dreaming, their existence. And so Lady Lilith wants to stop this. And so when the books start, you see her as this like demon queen possessor. But as you get to know her, you start to see she wants freedom for her people, freedom from the shackles that are being cast upon them by the dreamers of Eden. And she'll do anything to get it. She will sacrifice almost anything to get it. And after a while, you start to realize that your heart goes out to what she's trying to accomplish. And I think, and she's incredibly competent, and she's sad, and she's brilliant, and she's, torn, and she's trying everything she can do. And she doesn't take second place as a victory. In her mind, she has to free her people. And once you realize that, is she the bad guy at that point? I don't know. I don't know. I would do what she did. I mean, that's how I wrote her. I wrote her like, what would I do if my people were trapped in existence?
Is she a bad guy, or is she just a victim of circumstance?
That's right. That's exactly right. And so you nailed it. And so, I don't know if there's a, quote, bad guy. And then there's another entity in the world called Sovereign, and Sovereign wants to remake the world entirely. And at first you think, well, that's typical ultimate bad guy, plot. He wants to destroy the world. But as you learn more, you realize, hey, the world isn't what it should have been. And Sovereign knows it. He knows that something happened in the past that split the Eris and the people of Eden, and he wants to fix it. But he can't fix it the way it is now, because everybody's using the way, which is like the Force in Star Wars. It's the way. Everyone's using the way, and they're depleting that energy. And so he's like, look, the only way I can fix things is to redo it. Now, yes, these people will die, but all the people that I'm, charged to protect, who are still asleep, who are still available, who are still not been woken and, allowed to take on this world and this challenge, I'm keeping them and their needs alive. Is he evil now? I don't know. He's definitely evil compared to the people in the book who don't want to be remade and forgotten, you know. Yes, in that sense, you don't want to be the people on Eden because he's going to remake the world and you're gone. But his goal isn't just, I just want to kill everything to kill everything. He wants to do the right thing also.
Right.
And I think that doing the right thing is the point. That's the place where real drama happens. Everybody's trying to do the right thing as they see it.
Right, and everyone has a different perspective of what the right thing is.
That's right. Exactly right.
That quote works very well, and you gave us 2 examples of your quote-unquote bad guy or evil villain.
Right.
So
right. In fact, the hero of the story, Eric, he might end up being the bad guy. Really, in the end of the day, he might end up being the true bad guy because he's the one who might stop both of them. Does he create a world that doesn't move forward? Does he allow people to be possessed by the heiress? You know, if he chooses the wrong thing the wrong way, he will end up being the bad guy of this world.
That's an interesting.
Even though we rooted for him through 5 books.
So we're working on 5. How many books do you envision this being?
Well, I'm working on book 4, and that'll be out the end of this year. And book 5 will conclude the series. And then I have written enough backstory that the next series, tentatively called Techborn instead of Mythborn, will start, early next year. So I think 5 books in this series of Mythborn. And, again, I urge people go to www.mythbornmedia.com, which is MYTHBORN media, MEDIA.com. And, check out the full story. But, 5 books in this series. The 4th book will be out in about a few months, and the 5th book early next year.
Aside from mythbornmedia.com, can your readers get a hold of you via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any other media outlet?
Yes. So I'm vMythborn on Twitter. You can go to Facebook and type in Mythborn, and our site will show up on Facebook, Mythborn Media. You can get me on Instagram, and I believe that's vMythborn there also. So if you do a search for Mythborn, MYTHBORN, on all the social channels, our channels will show up. We plan to have a Patreon page very soon. The audio book just got finished, so Mythborn 1 will be in audio and released pretty soon. We're just going through our post-audio production on that to make sure that, all the sound sounds right. And for lack of a better word. And, we plan to release the audio book episodically, chapter by chapter on Patreon. So, I would say if you're interested, go to Amazon. Go to mythbornmedia.com, find out about us, and then from there, click our link to Amazon so that we get a little penny from Amazon saying we sent you there. That would help us out. And check out the book on Amazon, and we'll be join our fan club, and we'll be making announcements and letting people know when Mythborn will be available.
That sounds excellent. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so I wanted to thank you so much. Yeah, 30 minutes goes by so fast when you're having fun, and it's an intriguing conversation.
So you're a great interviewer, so I really appreciated your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about Mythborn and everything you're doing. I can't wait for the video game to come out. Yeah.
Someone said I took 35 million kids out of school, so I got to pay back that piece of bad karma by doing something good, right?
Right. Yeah, author, interviewer, blogger, whatever, but I also do video games, so
awesome.
Can't wait to add to my game library. So So thank you. And for this episode of Author Talk, good night, Atlanta, and hear you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. Sleep well, Atlanta.